So we're going to look at how to finger knit. And finger knitting is this act of stacking loops, one loop inside of another loop, 4 loops wide in this case, and eventually you start to get this little chain. And so our goal in this assignment is to practice finger knitting, and then eventually when we measure, we're going to hope that the length of our finger knitting is around 15 to 20 inches long. If you can finger knit 15 to 20 inches, you basically got it. Okay? So first thing you're going to need is fingers, and the second thing you're going to need is some string. So I'm going to undo this, which is what we're going to do in class. We're going to practice knitting with some of our bigger yarn that we have, and then we're going to re-ball up our yarn. So we'll start with the end at the beginning so you kind of get a feel for what we're doing here. Okay, so I got this big bunch of yarn, and then I'm going to wrap it up until it's all back on my ball again. Okay, so keep wrapping, keep wrapping. Okay, so I've got this yarn, and it's okay if you don't have yarn. You can try this with, maybe you've got some old like rope for a clothesline, you can work with that. We have this other, it's almost like similar to what you'd use to wrap around your lawnmower starter. We've got this kind of stuff that you can use. There's lots of any even regular yarn, even regular number 4 weight worsted yarn. Skinnier stuff is okay. But for finger knitting, it's really nice if you have it. We're going to use yarn that's around the diameter of a pencil. One of the things you need to do with finger knitting is you need to figure out how to hold the yarn. I could hold the yarn between my fingers here, and I can kind of pull it. I can have yarn between these fingers here. I can kind of pull it. For this one, we're going to actually hold the yarn. This is my left hand, and I'm going to drape the yarn, and I'm going to hold it between my thumb and my pointer finger. Notice how the short end of my yarn lays across my palm, and the working yarn, the part attached to the ball, goes behind my hand. Okay, so you're going to want to have that set up. Now you can finger knit on 2 fingers or 3 fingers or 4 fingers. We're going to do 4 fingers for this first one. Okay, one of the things we want to be able to do is we want to be able to go behind. So I got my pointer finger here, I'm going to go behind that. Then I'm going to go in front of my middle finger. I'm going to go behind my ring finger, and then I'm going to go in front of my pinky finger. Okay, so I've kind of got this behind and front, behind and front. This is a good place to pause and check. If you've got your middle finger and your pinky finger covered, then you're on your way. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you the other side here. And when I turn my hand over, I'm going to go over my pinky finger, under my ring finger, over my middle finger, and under my pointer finger. Now you're going to see I've got yarn on each of my fingers. Okay, I've got yarn on each of my fingers if I go palm up. Now I need to repeat this step again, so I want to get 2 loops. So since I just went around my pointer finger here, now I'm going to go in front of my middle finger, behind my ring finger, in front of my pinky, free up a little bit more yarn from my ball, and now I'm going to go behind. See, I'm going behind my pinky, and now in front of my ring finger, behind, and then in front. There we go. Now you can check and see if we're doing okay, because I should have 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 loops on every finger. If I turn my hand over, it's kind of got this working yarn, so I'm not going to count that. I've got 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And my pointer finger is where I started. I've got a couple strands of yarn kicking off the side there. Okay, so that's kind of how we check and see how we're doing. I'm going to make sure I don't lose my end. So if you got 2 on each finger, you're doing great. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this bottom loop, and I got to kind of like scrunch up my fingers here. I'm going to scrunch up my fingers, and I'm going to go off my pinky, and I'm going to peel this loop to the back. Then I'm going to go ring finger, I'm going to curl up my fingers. I'm going to pull this loop off to the back. Okay. Then I'm going to take my middle finger, bottom loop, and I'm going to pull this off and to the back. I'm going to go pointer finger. I'm going to pull this off and to the back. Now, as I do this, I want to take my ends here, pull those a little bit so I'm not losing anything. And then I've got these little loops off the back. Sometimes you can kind of tug on those a little bit. I'm going to pull my working yarn. That's the one attached to the ball. I'm going to pull that. So I got, now I'm back down to one loop again. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm always going to go behind my pointer finger, always in front of my middle finger, always behind my ring finger, and always in front of my pinky. That's as I work from left to right. Now as I go back, I'm always going to go behind my pinky finger, always in front of my ring finger, always behind my middle finger, and always in front of my pointer finger as I work from right to left. Okay? So then, just like before, I'm going to kind of scrunch up my fingers, and I'm going to tuck my pinky through there. I'm going to tuck my ring finger through that loop. Bottom loop, I'm going to tuck through. And pointer finger, I'm going to tuck through. Okay. So it's not going to look like much at the beginning, but as we go, it's going to shape up a little bit. So let's try that one more time. Behind my ring, in front, behind, in front. Now I'm going to reverse. Behind, in front, behind, in front. You can kind of tell because it makes these little X's in between your fingers. If you have the little X's, that's good. One of the really common mistakes people make is they get excited about wrapping and they wrap like 4 or 5 times. You really only want 2 loops on your fingers at any given time, and then you're going to peel the loops back. That's the most common mistake that people make, is they do more than 2 loops on the finger, and then it starts to get kind of funky. Okay? Behind, in front, behind, in front, behind, in front, behind, in front. And we're going to pull these off again. Okay, now I'm going to start to keep track every time I do these. So I can take and I get on a little piece of paper. Okay, so I've done one for sure. Now I'm going to go behind and front, every other. 2 loops on. Peel the bottom loop over the top loop. Counting is really important in knitting, so I'm going to count that second one. Do the same thing. And once you get comfortable, these things really fly. Now you're going to start to see that on the back side here, it's starting to look like something, which is kind of fun. Okay, so that was number 3. Do it again. Behind, front, behind, front, behind, front, behind, front. See the little diamonds or little X's. Bottom loop over the top. It's another common mistake. People pull the wrong loop off. Okay, there's 4. There's 5. Remember, the goal is to do 15 of these, or 20. Six. Seven. Eight. I like to give a little tug once I've got enough there. Here comes number 10. Get some more yarn ready. 2 loops on. There's 10. It's 11. $12. 13. 14. 15. Now let's just say you wanted to make something with finger knitting, like a scarf, and you had like 10 minutes between Google Classrooms. You could knit for a little while, and then how do we store this? So if you have a pencil or a pen, can be really nice, or a knitting needle. What you can do is I can pick up from the bottom of each loop, I can pull my fingers out of there, and I can kind of snug it up a little bit. I'm going to pull that tight so that it doesn't slide off. Okay, and then when it's time to go again, I've got to loosen, kind of tug on these little things. I gotta tug on them, and then I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna put the loops back on my fingers. There's 1, there's 2, be careful to not twist them. There's 3, there's 4, I twisted them. Make sure the work is behind when you re-pick it up again. There we go. And now I'm ready to grab my working yarn, and I can continue to weave. And when you're done, we'll lay this out. Grab a ruler, put the end at 0, and you'll see that my 16 stitches turned into about 16, almost 17 inches of weaving. You get about an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch per loop. And I would take a picture of that, and that would be your finger knitting sample.